We've all heard of accounts of the men in black appearing at people's doors, asking to be let inside. Often they hint that they are a part of some government agency and that they are there in an official capacity. Dissuading people from discussing their UFO sightings seems to be their primary goal. Sometimes they've been known to make threats, though there are cases in which people describe encountering MIB, though they have no idea why. In 1989, the witness, then about 12 years old, claims that he, his mother, and his brother had left to go to his brother's Cub Scout meeting in town. It was late afternoon, early evening. His father had chosen to stay behind. When they returned home, everything seemed normal, though sometime later, his father decided to relate to them the very strange thing that happened to him on that night. According to the father, not long after they had left to go to the meeting, some men had appeared, walking up the driveway, seemingly from nowhere. They had no vehicle, and he couldn't imagine where they would have parked since it was a narrow one-car road. They lived on 10 acres at the very end of a long dirt road in Washington State. Not too many people came out that way. Even stranger, they had a very protective female pit bull that would bark wildly at anyone who dared walk up their drive. Except this time she didn't. Even when they came to the door and knocked, she didn't make so much as a peep. The father claimed that he opened the door and was confronted by 2 or 3 very strange men. For some reason, this part of his memory is hazy. He had trouble recalling the exact number of men, only that it was 2 or 3. They were wearing all black. Black sunglasses, black pants, black shoes, black shirts, and all spoke in a monotone, very direct manner. They didn't introduce themselves, they only made a single demand that they repeated over and over. "Give us what we came for," they said. The father insisted that he had no idea what they were talking about, and for sure he didn't. Unhappy with his response, the men opened the door and walked inside. One of the men merely looked over at the dog, and the canine whimpered and cowered in fear. The father found this odd, as the dog would normally bark and run at anyone who entered the home, though this time she appeared to be quite frightened. The father wondered what would have caused that. They looked around briefly and then turned to leave. On the way out, the men threatened him, telling him never to speak of this to anyone. Fearing that they might return, the father did remain silent for a period of time. The father never did find out what they were looking for, and at no point did they return. He eventually passed away in 2012. His son would share his story in 2014 on the Pararational website. Floridian researcher John Keel would sometimes write of incidents in which a man in black or men in black would show up at a person's home and threaten them to remain quiet about their sighting, though the witness had not even thought of a UFO, let alone seen one. It was truly bizarre. Do the men in black make mistakes, or does their appearance serve another purpose? One that we don't fully understand. Moving on from the men in black, I would like to discuss a case from Russia involving a farmer. A case that melds the idea of reincarnation with ufology. March 1990, 9 a.m., Uritsky, Russia. 62-year-old farmer Alexander Kuzmich had risen early to tend to his cattle. He had planned on chopping down a small oak tree by the fence and was carrying out this task when he spotted something strange in the morning sky. When he first spotted it, he assumed that it was an odd cloud, though as he watched, he saw that it seemed to be descending right on top of him. It was enormous, and he became instantly frightened. Terrified, he raised his hands and screamed, "Oh God, please help me." He began to vomit, and for some reason he suddenly felt extremely tired. He watched as something spherical emerged out of the cloud. It landed on the ground not far from where Kuzmich was kneeling. Within seconds of it touching the ground, 3 tall man-like figures exited the craft. Kuzmich could not believe what he was seeing. The 3 figures slowly approached him. They offered him a friendly greeting which seemed to put Kuzmich's fear at ease. Despite the sheer oddity of the situation, Kuzmich found that he wasn't afraid at all. In fact, in that moment, he realized that his sense of tiredness and nausea had dissipated. He asked the 3 men if he could see the interior of their craft, something he found odd in hindsight. The figures agreed to his request, and together they walked toward the craft. Kuzmich counted about 13 windows, 90 by 30 centimeters rounded along the angles, along the perimeter of the sphere. As he stepped inside, he heard a faint crack and the opening closed behind him. He noted that once he stepped over the threshold, he felt lighter, almost weightless. As Kuzmich took in his surroundings, his fear slowly began to creep back. He realized how bizarre the whole thing was and yelled out to the figures that he did not want to fly with them. Rather, he just wanted to talk about their craft. Kuzmich turned around and was shocked to see a woman. He guessed she was about 40 to 45 years of age, standing behind him. She walked towards him and asked him to sit down on a soft, air-inflated armchair. Kuzmich cautiously agreed. At this point, a discourse about death and life after death began. She told Kuzmich many things, including that when a human died, he continued on into another life, until its long chain of sins was expiated. This process normally would take about 1,000 years. Kuzmich was unsure of the exact wording, though the gist of the message was that humans were in a constant process of life, death, and reincarnation, until the various flaws and imperfections were worked out. She insisted that the terrestrial life of man was considered an embryonic state. Kuzmich asked her if, after death, he would be able to see his dead relatives. She answered yes. It was then that Kuzmich asked about his son. He had passed away some 12 years earlier, and he was still heartbroken over it. 5 minutes later, a door opened, and Kuzmich's son stepped into the room. Kuzmich was stunned. He could not understand how it was possible, though it surely looked like him. His deceased son was standing in front of him. He appeared happy and healthy. Kuzmich broke down in tears as he ran to embrace his son. They exchanged brief greetings and spoke to each other. The son insisted that he was fine. As if realizing that he only had a few minutes together, his son reached out and kissed Kuzmich on the cheek. He then turned and walked out the same door. Kuzmich rushed over to the door and looked inside. He was astonished to see a lush, beautiful meadow with grazing horses, and numerous young men his son's age attending to them. The door suddenly shut. Wiping away his tears, Kuzmich, grateful for those few moments with his son, began to ask them a series of questions. He was desperate to understand who they were. He asked the woman about the operation of the ship. She explained that due to humanity's primitive state, he would not be able to understand it if she told him. She further mentioned that the people of Earth do not have contact with nature, but the people from the sky, her people, live according to nature's laws. She then spoke about magnetic fields and the power accumulators, apparently a simple device used to power the ship. Kuzmich had trouble understanding or articulating this aspect of the discussion. He recalled that she next spoke of future catastrophes awaiting humanity. She seemed to be warning him to prepare. Kuzmich did not elaborate on what those catastrophes were, sadly. He then asked about the cosmos, the stars and the planets. At this point, he felt a terrific acceleration and felt fatigued. Slowly, he approached a window and saw his village as the craft apparently approached it at a high speed. They seemed to be returning him. Before stepping off the craft, he asked for permission to speak to others about his encounter. The beings insisted that he speak of it, noting that nobody would believe him anyways. Kuzmich's account appeared in the Russian newsletter UFOlog. This isn't the first time I've discussed a case in which a person claimed to have seen a deceased loved one through contact with the visitors. Kuzmich seemed to think that the person he encountered on board the craft was indeed his dead son, though that is up for debate. It's no secret that the visitors have the ability to manipulate people, make them see what they want them to see. Kuzmich's apparent happiness at getting to see and speak to his son seems to be a positive. Kuzmich no doubt believed, possibly to his dying day, that his son was still alive somewhere else, and that he would eventually encounter him again, unless, of course, Kuzmich was on the final leg of his own atonement journey. If reincarnation is real and our souls are in a constant state of death and rebirth, it's interesting to think that the visitors might be tracking the movement of the soul rather than the person, as it transitions from life to death and life again, in a constant cycle. It is unclear what becomes of the soul once the atonement cycle ends. Apparently the visitor did not explain that aspect of the mystery.